Hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is Florida. I am preparing our next painting for Paint and Sip. It's going to be a lovely seashell. So even though it's the end of summer, I think we all love to still go down to the ocean and collect shells. So join me for the next Paint and Sip where I'll be featuring a seashell. I'm going to get this ready and I'll be right back to show you how we paint it. Hello everyone. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint this seashell here that I have drawn. I don't know if you can see that. There we go, that's a little bit better. I did use I used a watercolor wash pencil to draw it. So it will dissolve into my painting wherever I want my hard lines. I'm going to start this painting dry on dry. With the paper being dry, and I'm not going to use a whole lot of water. I am going to start with my light colors. I always start with my light colors. In watercolor, you go from light to dark. So doing just a little bit of a, maybe a little bit of a very, very faint orange with lemon yellow and alizarin crimson. I'm just going to kind of go through the edges here along the outside. Along the inside of the shell. And you'll notice that I'm holding my brush very loose. I'm not holding it all the way down here. I like to hold the brush in watercolor. In order for you to be really, really loose, you need to hold the brush on the back half of the brush. So it's a very good practice just to go ahead and just start painting holding the back half of the brush when you want to be really, really loose. Sometimes in watercolor you need to be a little bit tight and you can hold the brush a little bit closer to the edge, but one of the techniques when you're doing watercolor is you want to hold that brush really, really light so that you can really just feel with the movement of the water. You're not so tempted to be so strict with where the paint goes. So like I said, this is the paper is dry, so I am having to blend it very quickly so that the edges don't get really hard on me. I don't have really hard lines. So I'm blending that all the way out to the end. So now, as you can see, I have, my painting is now wet. So I'm gonna have to let that dry a little, but I'm gonna go back through the rest of my shell down here near the bottom, painting it very, very lightly, blending it in. I'm going to come back and kind of darken up those edges, but I like to do it very, very light too. It kind of gives me a guideline on where I want to go on my painting. I don't do a whole lot of drawing with a lot of details in watercolor because you really are going to be very free with your painting. So I have a little bit too much on there. So I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit with a paper towel. And since that is dry, I'm going to need for that to be dry before I can come back and do the detail on the shell. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wet the outside of the shell down here near the bottom. And I am using a round brush for this. I'm just going to kind of randomly paint with water around the edges of where I want my paint to go, not getting way too close to the shell itself. So let's just do maybe a little bit of green, kind of maybe a sea green kind of a color, and mix that with a little bit of brown as well. And I'm going to just kind of swoosh that in there. Just kind of let it go, really. So all I'm kind of doing is just mixing it in there and letting the watercolors go. I don't want to get too close to that shell because I want to come back in there and I want to do some other colors with that. I'm going to blend that out again because I don't really want some hard lines. Then maybe what I think I'm going to do, turn it over here. I'm going to do some other colors along the top. Again, not getting too close to it. I'm just doing this in a very, very light color because I always will go back and add different layers of shades of color. And just kind of really just randomly picking some colors that I think maybe the shell is sitting on the edge of the ocean, and maybe some colors have kind of picked up from different parts of the water. Really don't know. I'm just kind of going with it. letting the shell just kind of decide where I want these colors to go. Very, very light. Very, very light. And you can see that it's just kind of very light right here along the edge. It's not touching my shell. I don't want my shell to turn that color, not quite yet. It's okay to turn your paper around, that's all right. But just kind of blend that in a little bit. And I don't really want these hard lines, so I'm gonna just kind of take that out a little bit. And it's okay too, just kind of blot it a little bit if you have too much color. Let's add maybe just a little bit of, just some greens. Maybe add a little bit of green down here. Lighten it up a little bit. Let the watercolors kind of go wherever they want to go. Kind of blend in a little bit here and there. I think maybe I'll also just brighten it up just a little bit along the top. And I think I have a really pretty cerulean blue. Very, very bright looking blue. I'm just going to add that right along the top here. You're just going to let that blend in just a little bit. Just to give it some really nice contrast, maybe just pull it in like that. Again, not really knowing, you know, just like the ocean, you don't really know where it's going or what it's doing. So just let it flow. Just let it flow. I'm not going to overmix it too much. Just going to kind of let it go. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and then I'm going to come back in through here. We're going to darken it up, and then we're going to add some really nice contrast shadows on the shell, but I want it to dry a little bit more. I've got a little bit of a hard line right here, and that's okay. I kind of like that. I'll go back through if I want to just kind of maybe give it a little bit more contrast and some depth in the painting. So let's wait for that to dry, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're back, and I think one of the things that we're going to try is we're going to do this part of the shell in contrast. So rather than painting stripes on it where the shell has accumulated sand over time, we're actually going to paint to each side of the stripes, giving it a contrast to show the stripes. So let's see how we're gonna do this. We're gonna use a little bit of purple. So let's make some purple with alizarin crimson, and I think I used, what color did I use? I used an ultramarine. All right, so we are going to, if you think of the stripes as being striped on here this way, we're going to paint to each side of the stripe in contrast. So we're going to start here. The paper is dry. So think about it, that this right here is going to become the stripe of the sand right there, okay? So just going to kind of go up this way. And that's the stripe. And I am going to let the paint dry a little bit before I go back in and kind of blend in between the stripes. So the shell is kind of going along this way. So I need to be sure that I want the shell to look like it's wider. So as we do our stripes, we need to make sure that we are going in the correct direction. So I'm going to kind of go down this way to kind of give me a guide. I'm just going to kind of go right along there like that, so that the shell, remember this is in between the stripes. So now we're going to kind of go, if this is the stripe, we're going to kind of go around it like that. Okay. Then I'm going a little bit wider, a little bit more round. Okay. we go. Kind of like that. Here we go. Kind of blending in where the watercolor has kind of puddled. And we do want these hard lines because we're really kind of going in contrast. So now I'm going to just kind of curve this up around a little bit more. Kind of go around this way with it. Get me a little bit more of this purple. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the same color, but that's all right. Take some of that off. And I think we're just kind of maybe kind of end it right there. Okay. So that's the contrast of it. Then we're going to kind of go down this way. There we go. So now we have that. Kind of go this way. And what's nice about going back through after it is dry is it actually gives it really nice layers as well. You can see it's kind of giving its shadows. I'm just kind of going back through and adding other layers of color. I'm going to use a different color along the top, and then we're going to come back around to the bottom that way. So I think that looks good like that. I'm going to kind of wash through there a little bit. Now, what I want to do is I want to just kind of lift this just a little bit. It's a little bit too defined. So I'm just kind of randomly picking it up. Or I could do this. That's kind of nice too, right? Okay, so those are our lines, and then we can come back through and add a little bit of this really pretty blue, maybe up here to kind of give it some kind of gives it some depth. And we just kind of blend it in here and there, and that's okay. Just kind of blend it in, trying to stay out of the stripe lane. It's not always easy with watercolor, but that's okay because that's really what gives the watercolor kind of a mood. You know, it just kind of tells it, you know, I really just kind of going around with the ocean here and there, and I'm just kind of going with it. So I think that's all we're going to do with that. And then I kind of want to add a little bit more contrast along inside here to give it some depth in the inside of the shell, because this is really kind of a shadow inside the shell. Right, and that's dry, so we're just gonna give it a little bit of a shadow to give it some depth, as if the shell actually has an opening, right? Pick that up. There we go. Has a nice opening to it now, right? Remembering to hold our brush very lightly. So we could even, just to give it a little bit of depth right in through here, you know, it's kind of got dirt on it, so let's, you know, not make it look so sterile. Let's give it some color. Oh, I love the way these blues have kind of run in together like that. That's nice. So we'll just do that. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to take a smaller brush and I'm going to kind of come around the edges around here around the bottom so that we can give it a little bit more depth along the bottom. So I'm going to kind of, because these are swirls right through here, so I'm going to just kind of go and give some shadows in between. Right in between there. So you can see that shell. Okay. Then we definitely want to give it some contrast around the outside of the shell so that we can define really the outsides of the shell. And I really love this part about watercolor because I can go either as dark or as bright as I want to. And I don't really have to mix all my colors totally together. Now I have to be careful because this is wet. So let me not start there. Let's go ahead and start along this other edge right up in here where I said I was going to go back. I was going to give it more of an edge. And we're going to really bring out the shape of the shell with this dark, dark color. Again, just running them together. That's fine. And as it dries, I can come back through here and I can add darker greens to come along this edge to give the shell a lot more shape and some shadows. Using the water to erase more hard lines. All right, so we are now on the home stretch and we're going to go ahead and just add our final dark colors down here along the bottom to give the shell some really good definition along the bottom now that it's dry. I didn't want the colors to kind of run into the shell earlier. I'm really going to darken this up. Matter of fact, I'm really going to darken it up. I'm going to add even some browns to give it some really dark colors. I just really want to darken that up. I like that contrast right there. Okay. Very nice contrast. I think what I want to do is I maybe add a little bit more darker down here on the bottom. I want the shell to really come out. Really want it to pop. Really, really want it to pop. So I'm going to add it, make it darker down here along the bottom. Maybe what I'll do is I will make this kind of darker through here because the shell is kind of round like this. I'm going to make the shadow a little bit more round as well. Using the water to remove our dark lines, our hard lines. Maybe just kind of add a little bit of blue up here along the top. to give it some contrast around the shell. And one of the things that I think that I really want to do is along this bottom of the shell, because I want to give it that curve. I'm going to just wet it just a little bit. And I am staying away from this edge right here. I'm just going to wet it a little bit, just along the bottom where the shell has a little bit of a curve. And I'm going to add some shadows to it. Just a little bit of shadow, which is just the same color that I used in the stripe, and a lot of water. So if you think about it, it really just kind of looks like it's kind of sitting in the water with some shadows. So that's a really nice technique you can do, and you can go also back around through the bottom and do that. We can do it along the top. So I'll wet it just a little bit. And I don't want to do too much because remember the shell is supposed to look like it's kind of round out this way. So there's not going to be a whole lot of shadow around here, but I do want it to have a little bit more of a definition. So I'm going to just darken it up just along the top edges like that. And let the water just kind of go wherever. And I think I will do that along here. Remember, I took some blue along here and some green along there, so I'm trying to be very careful where I put my water so that my colors really don't run together between the shell and the water. Just kind of giving it some depth. And we can keep adding more and more colors. We can pull in a little bit of lines. We can run them together. And the technique of using water and removing your hard lines, giving it some shadows, is really what's going to make your watercolor pop and look a lot more professional. So we'll go back through after it dries. You can use a hairdryer to dry it, and just kind of go back through and show more definition in the colors of the shell down here. I really like the way this is kind of developed out here. I'm probably not going to touch that. But I'll just kind of wait for it to dry a little bit and kind of feel how I want my colors to go through. And we'll post the final when we're done. Thank you.